So I'm John Carrier.
I'm Dave Dillow. Can you guys hear us okay on the mic? We're going to try to share the podium here.
So this is besides introducing you all to the technical working group, we do want this to be a face-to-face meeting. So we're starting it off. We're going to go through some of what we're just in a status update, but then we do want to end with a conversation, open discussion, get feedback, start moving forward. And I've got notes here we can take and make sure we capture everything.
Okay. Sounds good.
Go ahead.
So, there's a lot of new people here to, their first LUG. Dawn on said, hey, it might be a good idea to talk about what the TWG is really about. So our goal with the TWG is we work with the Luster community, make sure that we're getting the features that we need, not only for the members of OpenSFS, but for the rest of the community as well. We've worked very hard to make sure our process is an open process, that we try to be as inclusive as possible. While we really would like you to join OpenSFS, we welcome you to the calls either way, the open reflector. Our particular job, we're responsible for creating and managing OpenSFS's development roadmap. We gather requirements from the HPC community. We reach out as far as we can. According to Torben, maybe we need to reach out a little bit farther, and we welcome suggestions on how we can bring more of our European brothers in. We prioritize and recommend development projects to the board. And then once we get that and some approval there and work on getting a budget, we put out RFPs for the categories of development that we find really important that need to be immediately addressed. And then we work with contractors to institute some management of those projects as they go forward.
So we've done the requirements gathering twice. We did it right after OpenSFS was created, and we did it again last year. We have made recommendations to the board twice. This has led us to one contract that we have with Intel WAM Cloud, and then we're also accept unsolicited proposals for work, and that's led to a contract that we have with Indiana University. And so then within that framework, we have volunteers who will then work with each one of those vendors, those contractors, to make sure that that OpenSFS is getting the value that our members' money is going to pay for support, for development.
So one of the important things we wanted to highlight is that this is a community effort. If you see your name up here, would you mind standing up for a moment? I know everyone really hates to do that because I hate it when SARP called on me, but could you stand up for a moment? There's a lot of new people, and it'd be really good for them to see the people who have been sitting here.
Get started.
Thank you, Corey.
So this is people, yeah, Steve, you're there. Yeah. So these are people that we had listed off the last 2012. And so it's a broad group, any one conference call. We don't, okay, you guys can sit down.
Well, I was like, before you say, everyone else, if you're new, look around. These are the people who have been sitting there and driving this process forward. These are some of the best in the community, but every one of them will sit there and tell you a very important thing is they're not the smartest people in the world. They can't know everything. If you want your priorities to be heard, you've got to participate just like them. They don't know everything. They're very, very, sorry, they're not, boy, I messed that joke up, didn't I? And so, we show exactly how well I lead. Yeah. Another reason it's very important for you to come out, because you can't rely on me to guess what you want.
So it's a long list. I just want to point out is that when we've had meetings, we've been in a lull while we've been getting through an RFP. We'll talk about this a little later. But at any one time, we probably have anywhere from half a dozen to 24 people that are on the call, depending on the topic. So these are people that just have shown up over the last year. We'll do another list next year of everybody who showed up last year, make sure, we want to see the list get bigger.
Yeah.
So this is the Community Luster Roadmap. You've seen this before. Chris showed this yesterday when his CDWG talk. What we want to point out here is the differentiation between what CDWG does and the TWG. So the roadmap, what is the release cycle, the release of the features, the maintenance release, that is all discussed and organized within the CWG. TWG is not dictating where things land on the roadmap, but what we are responsible for are those items that are landing. So what we've done is just taken that same slide Chris showed you and circled in red, those things that OpenSFS money is funding and that our group, the TWG, is responsible for bringing forward and managing the development of those projects so that when they are completed and they do land, that it becomes a feature that the CDWG can ensure lands in the community roadmap. So here's our first contract. Dave is the technical rep. I'm going to let him chat on that.
So, a long time ago in a galaxy far away, we awarded a contract to Wham Cloud to basically work on a number of projects that we had a pretty good idea of what the scope looked like. We had a good idea of what the needs were when we first started out. And Sun and then Oracle at that point and the engineers had done a lot of work, fully fleshing out the projects that needed to be done there and how much it was going to take. So we knew we needed better metadata performance. We had these large S&P machines that we weren't taking fully advantage of, and it was better to sit there and turn off CPUs than to run with more. We had serialization on directory operations, distributed namespace for those who've been around for a long time, clustered metadata, the project that will never end, which
It's finally ending.
is coming coming close. We're landing, so that's that's a wonderful thing. And then the Lustre file system checker, and you'll notice that we all of these different projects, they have a bunch of smaller projects within them, so that we can actually start to see some of the benefits before we have everything completed. And you'll notice that there's a lot of talks about those here this week. So where are we with all of those? Well, the metadata performance work, the single, hey, let's get more out of a single server, that's largely complete. The S&P node affinity work's been landed. The parallel directory operations have landed. D&E, as we said, it's this long scope of project. Well, remote directories is in demonstration, and that's a little bit different. Some of these are the contract terms for us as to what stage of the contract they're in. Remote directories is demonstrated, but it's been landed on the tree. We won't actually be fully out of the project until 2.4 comes out, and the feature is in that and ready to go. Stripe directories, we're scoping that. That we should see a document on very soon, and so that'll be continuing to move forward. Lustre file system checker, well, OI scrub is in. FID Endirant, Link EA, those are in demonstration. And we have some other pieces that are in scope, though, as Alex just pointed out, MDTOST consistency. It's another part where we're kind of in this contract phase versus the reality of it is that as we go through each phase, there's approval process from OpenSFS, and so it takes a little bit of time to catch up with the reality on the ground. They have scoped, but they've also written a lot of code towards that, so that the rest of it can fall out pretty quickly.
So I'll jump in here and just say that we maintain a contract wiki. So the wiki.opensfs.org, on the left side, you'll see a description of the contracts, and from there you can get to this or just go to this URL. We follow a process for every one of these phases. So that there are milestones, payable milestones to all our contractors, and we start off with a scope statement. So this is after a contract's been landed. We ask the contractor to describe what it is that they're going to do. So this is just finding what's in scope and what's out of scope. We all agree to that, and then they move on to the next phase, and then that becomes a solutions architecture. This is a high-level discussion of what is their plan for doing for solving the problem. Start looking at some test cases, what's going to be, how it's going to be used. Then when that's accepted, then we move on to a high-level design. And then it's a document that we get that describes exactly how the code is going to be implemented. And after that's accepted, then we finally move into the implementation phase. And so, and then after the implementation is completed, we go through a demonstration phase, and then it's not marked off here as complete until it's actually in a branch that's going to land in the community development tree. So just showing the code isn't enough. We want to see everything land. That's the whole point of the community paying to get this work done, is that we're looking to move the whole Lustre stack forward, get everybody to benefit. And so the wiki page actually will have, for both of the contracts we've got running now, has a list of where those documents are, and you can click on them, and once they've been completed and signed off, all the documents are available to the public for review. If you are interested in some of these things and you want to be involved in the review of the projects, then you need to get in touch with us and Dave in particular for this project, because he's the technical representative, and we can arrange to add you to that group, but that's doing those formal reviews.
And I will point out, I don't do this alone. I have a pack that I work with that has been phenomenal. And unfortunately, I don't have them all named here because I'm certain I will forget somebody. And, well.
So the pack is what we call the Project Advisory Committee. It's composed of members of OpenSFS, TWG, who volunteer to spend their time going through these once-a-week conference calls to get status updates from the contractors and then do the reviews of the documents when they're presented. Okay, so the next one is the contract that we awarded to Indiana University. Again, Indiana was been working on the wide area luster, and this was a project that we'd all identified and discussed during our first requirements gathering. They decided they wanted to move forward with it and presented, even though it wasn't selected as the high-level project that the metadata improvements were. But they came to us with a proposal and said they could get the work done. The TWG reviewed it, and we went forward to the board, made the recommendation, and that's our second contract. Our technical representative for this one is Nathan Rutman from Zyratex, and he also is leader of the PAC for the group. And we've got a number of people that are helping review this this contract. And there's two sub-projects that we've got within this. One is the UID GID mapping, and then the other one is the shared key authentication. And so some of this was described yesterday. The status on this project is a much smaller scope, but they are complete on the design documentation for both phases, and so they're in the process of just starting the implementations. And so as it was mentioned yesterday, these things I think are looking to land in 2.6, is that right? And then there's a link to the contract wiki again, describing all the documents that we receive go into this. When it's completed and checked off, it shows up in the contract wiki so that the community can review what it is, what's in scope, what's the high-level design, and the solutions architecture.
So for 2012, kind of recap where we were as we were coming into the RFP that we released earlier this year. We worked with the community and a number of participants, and thank you all again, to kind of identify the categories of development we wanted to kind of push for, that we knew we had areas of improvement. And I won't go through all of them, but availability and robustness were really big. Followed by storage management. Performance is a perennial issue of, hey, we need things better, and we wanted to try to do some things to work on Luster networking, which hasn't seen a higher level push as much as it has in the past with the bringing on routing and those kind of things. Again, this was a process that we reached out to the community, pulled in as many requirements as we could, as inclusive as we could. In fact, actually, the requirements document, as John was smart to do, put it out on Google Docs. We actually ended up doing all the voting. Andreas, Alex, and a number of others pushed together a spreadsheet to help kind of tally up where everything was so that we could kind of score the categories and try to reach a consensus across the community.
So the status, what we ran into in this set of requirements gathering is that the previous time, it was very clear that we had problems with Luster metadata performance. We'd been discussing it as a community for a long time, and the projects were pretty well defined on how to move forward. This area, there was no one thing that stood out. And so what we ended up talking to the different vendors about was the idea of doing design documentation. So we've got some ideas, and we're expecting there to have been, the first phase of this is to do some design work before the actual implementation. Am I jumping the gun on there?
No, not really.
Okay.
That's, basically, John says, take some of the benefit of experience with the HPCS scenario work with Sun to maybe fund some design work up front, and then get a better idea of, okay, how tractable is this problem, and how much time and money will it take to fix it?
Yeah, the HPCS reference was just that as part of our contract, Craig's contract with DARPA, we had engaged Sun to do a number of design descriptions for all of the became our metadata performance improvements, like D&E. So a lot of this had already been cooked, thought about, and so then we were able to move forward pretty quickly on that first phase for the implementation of those features. This isn't the case. So we're really looking at this phase, we're looking to help get identifying the high priority requirements, and we're expecting this first phase to just be a design phase. We're looking to get these ideas on how this could be done and spend time with the community researching the best solution.
So as John, we announced our RFP in late February. We were looking for proposals to further roadmap by meeting those high priority requirements that we put out on the last slide. We also wanted to broaden a little bit because some of these those projects require very in-depth knowledge of Lustre code and how things work, and we want to try to take this as an opportunity to broaden the community a bit more, and try to open up some funding for tools to help ease the administration and use of the file system, things that we can start to push out to students. That could be we could potentially fund students or other proposals like that. That maybe it isn't a huge 3-year effort to do something here, but maybe we could do a summer intern who could actually pull some of these pieces together. We want to also address the perennial topic of technical debt. We want to make it easier to have people come in and start looking at the code and be able to come up to speed. And that's always going to be a difficult prospect. But by helping to remove some of the technical debt from it, that makes that process that much easier. And if we can improve the documentation along the way, again, every little bit helps to make things a little bit easier to jump in the deep end of the pool. And also, our name is Open Scalable File Systems. We want to look a little bit beyond Lustre and look at other scalable file systems out there and see if there's things that we could fund there to help broaden the community a little bit more and see what other avenues there are available.
That's great. So we received a number of a wide range of interest. We got some responses, and we're now in the process of reviewing the responses we received. I'm leading that investigation. We've got about a half dozen people that are who helped write the RFP that have volunteered to help us do the review of the responses. But we want to make sure that that if that we're interested in having more people help out. So if you think that you have the time to help review the responses we have, please get in touch with Dave or me, and we'll arrange to get you engaged. The only restriction is that if you are the author of the response, then you can't be involved in reviewing your response. But otherwise, we'd like to get more involvement there.
And I will point out, as you mentioned, time commitment, that it is, it's not a terribly great time commitment. We're talking about maybe a day or so spread out over a couple of weeks. And so, don't let it sound like, hey, this is a Herculean task. It's not. There'll be a few calls, and some reading to do, but it's not the, we're not looking at proposals for an exascale system to DOE here. They're not quite that big.
So our goal is to get this done by the end of the month. We want to get at least a preliminary feedback up to the OpenSFS board. We're looking to pin them down on a budget, and so we need to be letting them know what we received and get them geared up to tell us how much money they can actually let us get into a contract. And then what we're planning to do, so we had a lot of interest. We actually got a third of all the original letters of intent. We only got a third of those LOIs that actually became proposals. So we know there's other projects that are out there, and we want to let you know that we've got this cycle of doing requirements gathering. We want to do that, and our hope was to do it in an annual cycle. But that will be a major churn of just making sure that we turn the crank, canvass the community, get new ideas, get those into a recommendation to the board for funding. But in the meantime, in between that, we also want to be open to receiving these other proposals from the community. So once we get the one set of proposals done based on our RFP, we're going to open up another RFP again just to do, to make it available to sort of a deadline for doing these unsolicited proposals. Just saying here, if you've got an idea, something that you want to do for Lustre, whether it is doing documentation or technical debt, then allow those proposals to come in. But that's going to be after we get done with this review of the latest version. So our meeting schedule. So yeah, about that. So we previously planned that we'd have a weekly placeholder for our meeting, and that we would cancel it or have it as need dictated. We don't want to have a meeting just to have a meeting. We all have day jobs. Unfortunately, it's probably been a few months now since we've actually had a technical working group meeting. Day jobs and slow progress on the RFP pretty much got in the way with that. There wasn't a lot to talk about in the meeting, so we didn't have it. So, so there were a lot of people that were actually working very hard on the RFP and getting the RFP out, but that's a subset of the whole technical working group. So what we had done is, after we had all decided on how to move this thing forward, We got volunteers who knew that they weren't going to be making a proposal to write the RFP and get it published. So there was a lot of activity. Dave and I were busy, but it wasn't just open to the public because it was in preparation for this, this funding round.
And John and I have been fairly good about getting cancellations to the list. I can't say we've been perfect, but we do try to at least keep it informed that, hey, we're not having that meeting. Going forward, I think we're going to move to a bi-weekly meeting. We'll keep it as a placeholder. Same times, Thursdays, 9:30 a.m. Pacific. And we'll post the announcements to the Discuss and the TWG lists. And that's a good point that we didn't actually put in the slides, is that we tend to do most of our work on the OpenSFS Discuss mailing list, because it's an open mailing list and you don't have, there are no requirements to be able to join that mailing list. So I'd encourage everybody to get on it so that you can easily watch what's going on and keep up with it. It's a very low volume mailing list, but that way you'll be informed of the meetings that are coming up. We don't expect to restart the meetings until the May 16th. We want to make some progress on the RFP, get that out of the way before we really get started on the meeting agenda again. So next steps.
Okay, I'll take it. So after we complete this RFP, we need to start getting on the next round of getting the requirements. Again, we wanted to do this on an annual basis. This last one dragged out a little bit, and so the requirements that we put out for the RFP were actually gathered the winter of 2011, 2012, and so we want to, it's been a long time, we want to get the thing cycled up again. But our point in this is that we really are, we need your input. If you have an interest, if you've got ideas, as Dave said, we don't pretend to have all the ideas, but we're really good conduits in hearing the ideas and moving them forward. So if you want to participate, please let us know, get engaged. And the last one is, the last bullet is Dave's, just.
Yeah. I think it was Einstein had a quote that, insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If you want to change the outcome, if you want to change the direction where Lester's going, or, even you want to make sure your feature gets into the mix, you've got to show up. You've got to stand up and make sure your voice gets heard, because we don't know everything and we don't know what your particular requirements are. And sometimes it's difficult. We have a meeting at 9:30 a.m. Pacific. And if you're in East Europe, that's a really poor time for you to come to a meeting. Well, the nice thing about the internet is the reflectors are open 24/7. Drop an email. There's many ways to get involved. You don't have to sit on the phone, the conference call to get your ideas heard.
Okay, so now that's our, first of all, take some questions. We want to get the open discussion going. And what we want to look at is, topics, so something to discuss. If you don't have questions about what we just presented, what are some topics that we can bring up in future TWG meetings?
Hi. At last year's LUG, there was a discussion of getting per job or process-related info packed into RPCs so that could be scavenged and statistics calculated to identify users and that were doing funny things. Is that a TWG topic?
It was.
No, so that's certain something we could talk about, and I think Andreas is I'm going to steal your thunder on it. I'm pretty sure that's in 2.4 now.
Yeah, so there's a feature job ID that's actually in 2.3. But yeah, it sends with every RPC, it sends the job information, which is just extracted from some environment variable on the client, to the servers. It's currently just used for statistics gathering on a per job basis. But in the future, we're hoping you could use it for like the NRS feature, the network request scheduler, so you can gang schedule IO from one job, or you could allocate objects, in a uniform manner for all of the processes in one job or something like that. But just right now, the information is being sent to the server.
And the servers are gathering it and a proc file system, so it is there.
But more importantly, the higher level thing, thank you. Those are kind of things, if you've got concerns like that, those are definitely things we'd like to hear about in the TWG.
So I had a question. You said that you had a lot of letters of intent Right, but we only had a third responses. Do you two have any idea why that was? What was behind that, and what we could do to try to, get those other people to submit a proposal?
We discussed this last week. We had our first meeting last week of the review team. We discussed it. It's in my court to contact those people who didn't submit to find out what was wrong, what happened.
Okay,
I haven't done that yet, though.
all right, thanks.
Okay, what about topics for future discussions? What are things that, whether it's specific feature requests or technical problems that Luster needs to solve that we could bring forward? The TWG has been a forum where, in the past, like for example, when WAM Cloud and Intel HPDD got the Fast Forward contract, Eric came forward and gave us a talk, first sort of good public technical discussion of what it was that they were planning. So this is another opportunity if there are technical topics that you want to get in front of the community. This is a chance to do it outside of LUG. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious if there's any possibility of getting user-based quality of control, quality of service, like fair share scheduling, so that one user can't saturate the, if one user has a huge amount of I/O, he can't saturate the network and prevent other users' I/O.
I would say, sure, there is absolutely a possibility, and I would invite you to our meetings to help flesh that out and muster some additional support so we can prioritize that. That's certainly something we could take forward and try to get some more design going around it.
So that is related to the job ID question, in that data is now being gathered, and as Andreas mentioned, NRS is a tool that could be used to help restrict access to the number of clients. You could come up with some sort of policy to say that this user or this job has so much bandwidth or can use so much of the resources. But that doesn't, those tools, the foundation is there, but the actual tool implementing that isn't yet available.
All right, everybody's ready for the break.
More coffee. Okay, so again, we've got two reflectors. We didn't put that up there. We've got two reflectors that we use. We've got a wiki page. The TWG reflector right now is restricted to OpenSFS members because we use that to gather voting during the requirements gathering, but all of the discussion is going out on the Discuss. So whenever we post anything from our meetings, it goes to both reflectors. And Dave and I are committed to keeping this as open as possible. So please get involved, send questions to the Discuss list, and we can be sure to get it brought up on the TWG meetings.
Or feel free to send stuff. Our contact information isn't on the screen at the moment, but it is on the wiki, and feel free to contact us in private if you're not comfortable speaking about your requirements in public. It's more important to us that we get the requirements and kind of aggregate the needs of the community than it is for to have someone immediately stand up and say, this is exactly what I want. It can be intimidating. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.